Hi, everybody. Welcome to block one of the Barn Star Sampler Quilt as part of the Homemade 2024 Block of the Month Club. We are making the Diamond Star. This is a nice big block, and it looks sort of complicated. But when we break it down into the different quadrants, it's really just four of the same block, like this block four times, this part four times, this part four times, and then this center bit. So we're going to get started. I should mention that you should always be starting these classes ready to cut your fabric. I'm not going to go through and cut all of the fabric. So come to class with your fabric cut if you are watching live, but I won't cut all of it or else we would be here for quite some time. But I am going to start. So I've got my organizational case for block one this week. I'm going to start. I've started a little bit putting some of my fabrics there. Basically what's going to happen is first thing I'm going to do is get out each of my fabrics and snip off just a little corner to go on to what it says, like fabric 12. There we go, fabric 12. I've got a couple more here to do with you. So if you're looking at your, starting on page 13 for the Diamond Star, you'll see the fabrics here as they're listed. And we're going to go ahead and fill out our swatch sheet. That's the first thing we're going to do every single class is fill out the swatch sheet. So I'm going to take fabric 15. And when you've got a fabric that's a low volume print like this, yours might look different for your fabric 15, but make sure you get a little piece of whatever distinguishes it. So in this case, I've got a little petal. And so fabric 15, I'm just taking the corner off so it shouldn't interrupt things too much in terms of cutting. And putting a little dab of glue there and right in the corner. And so I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 fabrics that I need to put on here. This is from the next one. I was just testing it out. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so once you've got your swatch sheet done, I've got the white one here. It's hard to see on camera, but it's there. Once you've got your swatch sheet done, you can put that aside. Keep it handy though, because you'll be referring back to it occasionally. And let's get ready for, I will cut out just one first bit because I want to reiterate that it's sometimes important to cut out your largest block size first. So for me, we're going to start, you're going to start by cutting all of the white prints, but I'm going to start with my largest block first. So that's the 5.5 by 5.5. And so I'm just laying out my fabric. If you're new to quilting and not really a very strong cutter, I'm going to post a fabric cutting basics video in the comments, and then you can sharpen up your cutting skills, so to speak. But essentially, I'm leaving this doubled up because I need 2 of these, because remember, we're always cutting for, in this case, 2 blocks. We need to make 2 of this block. And you'll notice here in the materials section is where it says how many of the block you need. The materials are for making 2 identical blocks needed for the Barn Star Sampler. But there's other projects in this book that use this block or some of the other blocks. And so you may find that it's not just featured in the Barn Star. It may be in something else also. Like, for example, the block we're making today is also in this larger wall hanging. Isn't that gorgeous? So In this case, we need 2 for the Barn Star, but if you were making this particular wall hanging, then it would go on to give you the rest of the instructions to make it that much wider. So it's a little bit confusing because it's not just about the Barn Star, but here in the materials, you'll see how many blocks you need for the Barn Star. So we've got 2, but the cutting instructions are for 1. So I'm going to double this. So I need 2 5.5 by 5.5 inch blocks here. So I'm just going to cut off that extra little bit of selvage because because I cut that corner for my sampler sheet. And I'm going to go over. So I've got a half, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so when you're cutting this, it takes a little bit of time because, when you're cutting a big quilt all at once, you cut everything all at once. This is a lot of small bits of cutting. So just cut it block by block and you'll be fine. But it does sort of mean the setup I found to be a little bit different in terms of like wanting to have an area for quick cutting, an area for pressing, and then quickly being able to sew. Because you're doing all of these things, when you're making just a block, you're doing it simultaneously. So you have the option of making 2 of these at one time or making them 1 at a time. I'm going to be making 1 of these blocks, but I'd encourage you just to do everything twice. It will save a bit of time, but if you're new to it and feeling a little uncertain, make 1 and then make the other one. And my guess is that as you go, you'll get stronger and you'll be able to just make 2 at the same time. Okay, I've got half, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Make sure we're square here. All right, there's quite a bit of scrap in this, but set your scraps aside and hang on to them because we may need this fabric. So this one, for example, is fabric number 25. It may appear in later blocks and you may need some of fabric 25 later on in the quilt. So don't go, using your extra white that's in here just yet. Okay, so I'm going to quickly label this because this is an L piece and I want, it's just going to help keep you organized if you put even just a little piece of paper with a pin, or if you've got some stickers. I've just got some dots from the dollar store, and that's an L piece. And I'm just going to set it aside so we know as we go that we're going to be pulling those letters of the alphabet. So as you cut, just as I did there, I cut 2 of them, even though the pattern's only calling for 1, because we need to make 2 blocks. So for each of these, you're going to double the cutting. So you need 16 3 by 3 inch squares from that same white fabric, number 25. And so you could go ahead and put number 25 in your book because you know that that's fabric 25. And if you're coming back to it, that's going to help. Otherwise, it just says from white print number 1, and you have to kind of refer back to that. So if you just put a little note in your book, fabric number 25, you know what that is. And we're going to double these. So instead of 16, it's 32, 32, 8, 32, 16, and 2. And then you're going to have enough cut for both blocks of the white. And then you'll go on and do the exact same thing. So I've got A. You're going to go on and do the same for your dark prints. That's B. From the green, D, and F, and so on. We're going to get to the assembling because the cutting is fairly standard, and it took me, well, an hour and a half, probably a little bit more, to cut it. So we don't want to be live that whole time. I'm gonna let you do your cutting, and we're gonna go ahead and start assembling. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take one of piece A and one of piece B, and we're going to make 32 half square triangle units. So let's take another A. And if you're uncertain how to make a half square triangle, if you turn to page 74 in the book, there's a whole special technique section, and it shows you how to make some of the basic units here. Half square triangles is right here. But I'm going to show you now anyway. So if you have a laser, you can skip this step, but basically right sides together, one block, and make sure you've got your right side, your right fabric side down. If you've got a smaller ruler around, this would be a good time to use it. I'm just looking for mine. Got a bit of a smaller one here. And I'm drawing a line right down the center. And we're going to sew a 1/4 inch on either side of that line. Your kit came with a spool of Deco Bob thread, pink or white, all good. It's 80 weight, and wind your bobbin in that too. And you're going to have a nice thin but strong thread. It may mean you want to decrease your tension a little bit on your sewing machine. So I've decreased my tension to 1.8 just to tighten everything up a bit because the thread is so thin. I'm using the HP foot, but you could be using your regular foot for this, just so long as you know you've measured over a 1/4 inch. So you could push your needle over so that you've got a 1/4 inch, or you could use your 1/4 inch foot and put the guide right along that line. Or if you've got a laser, you could lay the laser down a 1/4 inch over from center, and you could follow the laser. So I'm just going ahead. My stitch length is at 1.8 because I'm piecing. And so a smaller stitch length, it's not going to do anything bad. Makes it a little hard to pick out if you make a mistake. But it's just a little more secure at 1.8. And again, I decreased that tension also down to 1.8. So on one side of the line, I've got a row of 1/4 inch stitches. And on the other side of the line, I've got a row of 1/4 inch stitches. Now, if you're familiar with making half square triangles, I would suggest what's called chain piecing, doing all 32 on one side first, and then all 32 on the other side, so that you've got 32 of these little blocks with the line in the middle and a row of stitches here and a row of stitches here. So I'm just going to go ahead and make this half square triangle. First, and then I will do the rest. So in the instructions, you'll notice there are some arrows. These little arrows right here in the middle, I know it's hard to see because it's small, but it's pointing towards the blue. That's the way you're going to press your seams. And so I would suggest setting yourself up, if you can, fairly close to your ironing board or an ironing pad. I'm bringing this little pad over. I've got my iron right here. And it's just going to help keep things flowing. Because there's lots of this little kind of small bits of work where it's like, okay, half square triangle, I need to press these fairly quickly and we can be good to go. And I'm going to press towards the blue. So I'm going to go ahead and make a few more of these, and we'll chain piece them, because ultimately what we're trying to make here with all of these units is this quadrant here. So we'll keep that in mind. So more of the A and B pieces, right sides together, and to chain piece, we're going 1. You're going to do 32. And I'm going to go ahead and draw those lines on. And when you do it all at once, like one job many times in a row, it helps because it saves you all the prep. So again, I'm just stitching on one side, a 1/4 inch away. This time I'm going to chain piece. I'm not going to break the thread. I'm going to stop sewing, but I'm just going to bring the next one right over. And on my machine, I actually have a button that will allow me to stop sewing with the presser foot up. This just helps save a step also, so I don't have to press that button, because this machine has automatic presser foot lift. But if you don't, you'll just obviously lift it up, no problem. See, now you'll see it lifted up. That's a time saver. So I can just bring this right over. I'm sewing on the Janome 9480. That's the new 9480. Okay, so once you've chain stitched your 32, you can snip in between, or if you're very good at chain piecing, you don't have to snip. You can sew the other side, but I always snip. I just find it less jumbly. All right, other side, chain piece again. Again, you'll be doing this for all 32. Remember, if you have any questions, you can leave them in the comments, and I will get to them after, so that we can continue this as one straight class. And scissors. Okay, and now a bit of a time saver that I like to do, as long as your half square triangles are pretty even, is I like to line them up in a stack to trim them, at least like this. You could probably do, well, however many you're comfortable with. And then that way it saves quite a bit of time in trimming them. So now we've got our stack of half square triangles. You're going to have, again, a stack of 32. And I am pressing towards the blue. So I'm opening it up and just pushing kind of towards the blue. You could give it a shot of steam, or you could start on the other side, but just make sure you don't have like a fold here. Sometimes if you do it this way first, you end up with a fold that isn't quite on the stitch line. You want to make sure that stitch line is nice and spread out. That's why I like doing it this way. So I open and I press so that it's going, the blue is going back on itself. And so you'll get all of these pressed up. You'll have quite a large stack, and then you'll start pulling from them. But first we need to trim them. get the rest of these, because you'll notice they've all still got the little dog ears on them, the little flaps. These need to be trimmed. You'll see in the instructions, it will say, and trim them square to 2.5 by 2.5. So 2.5 square. Now, I tend to do a little bit of cheating, and I like even lining these up to trim them, but that's because I feel like, oh gosh, there must be a time-saving way, but you have to make sure your lines are really lined up. And if you have a 2.5-inch square ruler, you could use it now, but otherwise, line up your diagonal line. And remember, you're going to be pausing this and stopping and starting because you have many more of these to do than I do. And so you're going to line this up with the diagonal line on your ruler. And that diagonal line on your ruler, most rulers have that diagonal line. And then you're going to count down 1, 2, and look for that half mark. But you're not going to go up and down like this. You're going to slide that diagonal line along the diagonal line of your half square triangle until that 2.5 mark, until you've got a little bit showing on each end. So it should fall over a little bit, and all of that can get cut away. So go, keep it lined up. And you want to be fairly confident in your cutting, especially if you're layering. Otherwise, you want to do these one at a time. So now, because I've got one side trim, I'm going to line this up exactly on the 2.5 mark. And anything left is trimmings. Especially on that seam, it's tough. There we go, lots of muscle here. And then you've got 3 trimmed all at once. But be confident in your cutting skills if you're going to be layering up like that. Otherwise, just do them one at a time. And then that's, of course, taking the dog ears off at the same time. You're not just taking the dog ears off. There is a little bit of room because we cut these at 3 inches. And so you may have a little bit of room to wiggle here, especially if you're using that HP foot, and that scant 1/4 inch seam oftentimes gives you extra trim room, which is nice because then your blocks are so perfect that you've got a little, because you get to trim them and really square them up. If you have a rotating mat, it would be good here, or you can just turn it yourself. Try not to lose your line. So now I'm lining the diagonal line up, and then with 2.5 and 2.5 here. That way, everything else is trimming. It's quite a bit easier to do it not stacked. It just takes a little bit longer. So if it hurts your hands or it's not working out, just do them one by one. Slow and steady wins the race often. Okay, you'll end up with a nice big stack of trimmed half square triangles. And I'm just going to bring over some that I've got ready to go here. So next up is we want to make And now this is one part that I originally was kind of confused on, because oftentimes in quilt instructions, this is part 1, this is part 2, and these two look very similar. It looks as though you may take this unit and then attach this green square to it, but that's not the case. This is a unit and this is a unit. So this is a whole separate little project, and this is. Don't take this and attach a green square to it, because then your shape will be, your half square triangle will be the wrong direction. Ask me how I know. See, I made that mistake. So the next step is to take one of your units and another C square, and to line it up just as it's showing in the picture here. So we've got our square, make sure it's the right, yep, fabric is the right side up. The white on white prints are hard to sometimes make sure you're getting the right, whoops, that's the wrong square. I need the little square. There we go. There's a bunch of different sizes, so careful. So you're using a 2.5 by 2.5 inch square. That's number C. This is the C, and then your unit. And so then you're going to go right sides together, and you're going to sew along here, and you need to make 4 of these. And you're making 4 because there is 4 quadrants that are exactly the same. You don't need 4 of these in one of the quadrants. It's just one piece in one of the quadrants. So, and then we're going to press, the arrows pointing up, so we're going to press towards the white. So see what I mean about the sewing and the pressing, the sewing and the pressing? Having it handy will really help. You don't want to be having to run to the basement for the iron and you're sewing upstairs or something like that. Okay, so you need 4 of these little units. They're easy enough to put together once you've got your half square triangles trimmed. So you can set those aside. And then what we're going to do is we're going to make this unit right here. We also need to make 4 of these. So we're going to take a half square triangle, and this time we're bringing in our D fabric. That's the green one that's already cut. So we're bringing in a D square, and again a C square. So it helps, again, to have those labeled. They're all 2.5 by 2.5, and whoops, this needs to go this way. Make sure your directions, like your half square triangle, is facing in the same direction as the one in the book, that it's not down like this, or else all of your pieces aren't going to flow the right way. So it's important that you follow that. That's got the dark side upright. And then we're gonna make 4 of these units, so you could be laying them all out, and you're gonna go right sides together. And you could chain piece all 4 at one time and open it back up, and then you're going to bring over the other side. It's not necessary to press this seam right now because we're not sewing over that seam. You never sew over an unpressed seam. You want to make sure if you're sewing over it, it's been pressed. But in this case, we're just sewing right here, so we don't need to bring it to the ironing board just yet. We can right sides together here and sew that 1/4 inch right there. Oh, I had the wrong side up. That white on white fabric, so tricky. Make sure you've got the right side there. Okay, and now the pressing is all happening toward the white block. So I'm lifting and pressing over. pressing over towards the white. And I'm just pressing it, give it a little shot of steam. Some people hate steam. They think it stretches things out. But if you're just holding it there, a little shot of steam is great. It's not going to stretch. Remember, you're not seesawing back and forth. Okay, so you need to have 4 of these little number 3 units, 4. And that's how you make them, and you can set it aside. Next up, we need to finish off the rest of our half square triangles, and we need to make a unit of 3 half square triangles. So you'll lay them out. 1, 2, 3, and then you're just going to go right sides together. Make sure your unit is going like this, and you don't end up sewing them side to side. So right sides together and sew across here. And you need to make 4 of these units as well. So this is going to take up 12 of these half square triangles. So you're going to have you're going to have 4 rows of these 3. You're going to make this 4 times. So right sides together. There's 1. We don't need to press it yet because we're not sewing over the folded seam, but we want to make sure this is going the right direction. So right sides together here, and then we're sewing that 1/4 inch along the bottom there. There we go. So now the arrow is pressing downwards, so we're going down towards the blue. Just making sure none of these sides got flipped accidentally. That happens sometimes. Okay, so you'll end up with 4 of these strips. Essentially, remember what we're making is this quadrant here. So you can kind of see how they start to come together. We've got our little 1 unit there. We've got our other unit here. Okay, so set them aside. And next up, number 5. So we're making 4 of all of these. Just I keep reiterating that because I'm making 1 as we go just to keep the class moving, but we're making 4 of these each time. So number 5, we're taking some more of those half square triangles. That's why we needed so many of them. And let's lay it out. Always lay it out first. So we've got 1, lay it out in the right direction that it's supposed to go. So we've got those half square triangles. And then we've got another D piece. So that's another green piece. And don't worry if your green looks a little different. It's pretty close. And again, it's laid out just as they've got it in the book here. And then we can go right sides together. And remember, you're going to need 4 of these. So lay it out 4 times, and then right sides together, and you'll go right sides together, and then you could chain piece, and that would save some time. Okay, and then the next side, we'll go right sides together, and I'll chain piece this one. That way they both come off at the same time. All right, so now we've got two sides of this one strip that needs to come together now. Open it up. Uh-oh, there we go. Make sure it's laid out the exact way so it still looks the same. Always take the time to lay it out in between, because you wouldn't believe how often you inadvertently do this and then sew that together, but that's wrong. So it needs to go like this. And then right sides together again. No need to press yet because we still have this seam to do and we're not sewing over those ones. Okay, and the arrow here is pointing towards the green, so that means we're pressing, ta-da, towards the green. You want to go towards the green here. And this is going to be important because some of these seams, as we build the block, are going to nest. Not all of them do, but some of them do, so it's important to follow the instructions for which way to press your seams. Love this iron. It has the tank, the water tank on the bottom, so you don't have to keep refilling it. It's a beauty. Okay, so you'll need 4 of these units, and you will set those aside also. Next up, we're going to start assembling the bigger block here. So we're going to take an E square. So we've got our E squares here. That's a bigger square. And you've got 4 of these, and you're going to assemble all 4 of these quadrants, but I'm going to do one right now. So, and it kind of goes together. They don't break it down, but you can kind of see how it comes together. So the E square starts with the little number 2 unit, just like this. Let's lay it out first. The number 2 unit, that's going to come together. Then that's going to make it big enough for that number 3 unit to tack on. And now we kind of see the arrow shape starting to form. And then once we've got that built, it's going to be big enough for that unit we just made. Oh, hold on. We have one more. Nope, we need to bring, then it's going to be big enough for this one at the side. Sorry, guys. There, and then it will be big enough for this one. And then that is going to make our finished quadrant like this. So let's just take it one step at a time. Right sides together. 1/4 inch. And if you're making all 4 of these, you can do this step 4 times. So again, feel free to pause the video while you catch up. Now, it will be important to press these seams as we go because we need to sew over here the next time. So you'll see there are pressing instructions, so it's going towards the smaller unit. So I'm going to press towards the half squares. Make sure nothing got flipped. Everything's lying nice and flat. That steam is so good. All right. And so then we can go right sides together here. Now we're going to want to nest these seams. We took care to press in the correct direction, and that's going to allow for these 2 points to perfectly match up. So what we want to do is not just line up the ends. We don't really care that much about the ends. Well, I mean, we do, but we mostly care about these points here hitting exactly together. That way you get that nice sharp point. So when you nest the seams, you bring this little ledge and this little ledge together. You butt them, you nest them together, and you can kind of feel it with your finger and thumb there that they're pushed right together. And then you can just take a little pin and put it right through that seam, and then go ahead and see where your ends line up. If you need to put another pin, you can, but you really want to make sure that point. That's how you get those perfect points. And I'm just taking care to not run over the pin and to make sure this is lined up at the end now. As I go to remove the pin, take that out and hold with, I'm just holding with my fingers so that nothing flips, and we have a nice crisp end there. And now let's take a look. Ooh, yay, it's so satisfying when they line up. So that's a nice, perfect point because of that nested seam. All right, it wants me to press towards the big white square. So let's bring this so you can see it overhead here. And I'm going to flip it this way when we're pressing. Looks nice. Okay, let's lay it back out. All right, now it's big enough. We can do our number 4 piece to our bigger unit, right sides together. Now here, again, we're going to try to nest these seams and aim for those points to match up. So just, I'm going to take a little pin, kind of make sure it's right together with my fingers there. And same with this one. Again, not worrying too much about the ends, but more so the points in the middle. If those are nice and nested, then you're going to be happy with how it lays. Because you can always trim the ends. And take a look at your own block before you sew it. When you start to get a lot of pieces like this, take a look at which direction you'll be sewing. Make sure, like, you know, you're not going to inadvertently flip the pieces up. Whichever one looks more difficult to sew on, maybe that's the side you want to have flipped up so that you've got a little bit more control over the seams. I'm going to get real close to my pin, but not hit it, and then pull it out. Real close, like it's under the presser foot, it's just not touched by my needle. Remember, in quilting, you don't backstitch. You try not to run off the end, but you don't backstitch. Okay, all right, those points are looking good again. Good. And now we want to press towards the blue units. Take a look that nothing else got flipped over. Okay. And last one of this quadrant. Right sides together. This, sorry, I think I told you guys, I think this has to press this way. Not towards the blue unit, it's towards the green. Sorry. That way it's going to nest. They're all going the same way. It's live. What can I say? All right. So if you see if that happens, just press it the other way, and then you know you can nest all your seams. All right, let's nest this. Another pin. All right, and then once you've got it pinned, you can sew that 1/4 inch down. Now I press towards those units. Looks good. Super cute. Oh, I had a couple things flip up here, just in the, so let's make sure we're keeping those where they're supposed to be. It's hard when one goes this way and then the others are meant to be facing it, but you'll be glad in the end that you took the time to do this, because when the quilting section happens, you won't end up with lumps and bumps in your quilt. All right, so just take a second and press it all nicely. Give it a shot from the front. And you end up with 4 corners. And doesn't this make a nice block just on its own? So, all right, we've got our pieces here. Now, these are going to get spread out, and we've got some middle work to do here, and we need to create 4 more quadrants. So let's set these aside, and we'll start with the next set of pieces. And this is making the side units. So we're starting here at number 1, and we're going to use pieces G and F. So we've got an F piece and a G piece. And we're going to make what looks like a flying geese, an elongated flying geese. But normally when you make flying geese, you put something here and it cuts and it goes like this. There's a special way to make these elongated flying geese. And if you turn to page 76, I believe. Yeah, 76. It shows how to make these elongated flying geese units. And it's a little bit different. What you do is, so if I have my F piece here, I have a bunch of them cut. So I have F as the middle, and then I have G. So I need 2 G pieces. And you're going to make 8 of these. So I'm going to make 2 at once here, just to show you how you can chain piece them, but you're going to make 8. So what happens is you take your F piece and right sides together, you go down this corner here. Let's take another piece, make sure it's the right side. And then what happens is we're going to draw that line from here to here. Essentially what we're doing in this block is we're making this unit here, which is the side units. So that's going to be that elongated flying geese, but just to give you an idea of what it is that we're making. Okay, so I'm going to draw the line, and I'm going to draw the line. Make sure you're getting to the corner of the bottom unit because it's covered here. So you want to make sure you're hitting that corner. If you have the laser, you're going to go right down the center, and we're not sewing on either side of the line here. We're sewing directly on the line here. That's a big difference. So directly on the line. So if you have a laser, you're going to go right in the center. Bring the next one over. And you're going to notice that if you turn it, you can butt the sides up. If you were to do it from this side, it would overlap and it's kind of gets tangled. But if you turn it and sew this direction, everything stays nice and flat and butted up for chain piecing. So you're going to make 8 of these. And you've got 2 more G pieces. They're sitting here in my pile. There we go. You have lots of piles. So those are waiting in the wings. These need to be trimmed and pressed first. And now this is our first chance of trimming off what will be many of these triangle ends. So I'm going to layer these up because we're pretty right on the money here. And remember, you're going to have 8 of these for 1 block, 16 for 2 blocks. So if you're doing all 2 blocks at once, you need 16. So I'm trimming off a 1/4 inch away from the stitch line. And now look, I've got these little triangles that are perfectly paired up. This is not part of the Barn Star. This is a whole separate project, but I'm going to go ahead and just sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance right down the longest edge here while I'm at it. It doesn't take much to sew these little edges. And this is just a way for you to use up what will be an enormous amount of these triangles. Again, this is not part of the quilt. You don't have to do this, but you're going to end up with tons of these kind of unusable scraps. And what's going to happen is if you just go ahead and sew them together, you're going to end up with all of these great little units that at some point we can trim, put together, use as other little blocks for other things. So while you're at it, do yourself the favor and just sew them together and set them aside. You don't have to, but why not? All right, so now that these are trimmed, you'll have 16 of them. We're going to go ahead and we're going to press towards the white. Give it a little finger press first. That helps. Or if you have the roller. So I'm going to press towards the white. Press towards the white. And then I need to finish the elongation. So I'm going to take that other G piece, and just like you would with a regular flying geese unit, but instead we're going down just like this. Then we're going to draw the line this way. That way, when it folds up, we've got that longer unit. So get that in place, get this one in place, right side down. And it's normal to have that overlap over top of the white, that's fine. And we're going to draw our line this way. Okay, chain piece. You've got 16 of these for 2 blocks, 8 for 1 block. And again, if you go the right way, you'll be able to butt those up. Okay. So you'll have many more. So I'm going to line these up again. Maybe line 2 up at a time, maybe 3 up at a time if you're wanting to save some time in the trimming, but just be careful here because flying geese are tough in terms of getting it all really lined up. So don't mess anything up by trying to save time in trimming. So I'm lining up a 1/4 inch from, so that 1/4 inch line is right on top of my stitching, and I'm just cutting those away. Now look, more little triangles. I'm going to sew these together. I mean, it just makes sense. They're already matched up with a fabric that looks good with it. So we'll have a beautiful something scrappy in the end. All right, so now we're going to press towards the white. Now, all of these blocks come with measurements on what they need to measure at the end. And I find with the flying geese unit, it's sometimes you get, like I've got one here, like this little extra edge right there. It happens. Even though this is mostly straight, sometimes it kind of bows over a little. It just happens with flying geese. They're sometimes a little tough. In the end, these units are meant to measure 2.5 by 8.5. So just take a rough look at where you're ending up. And so you can see I kind of come in a little bit here. This is measuring exactly 2.5, but it's just kind of the placing of where the, and kind of not perfect sewing. But I'm going to be able to make up for this in my next seam allowance. So I'm not going to sweat it too much. If I'm bowing out too much here, you could go ahead and take off a little bit so that it is nice and straight on the start line, but that's pretty close. You could take off a smidge right here, but ultimately though, I'll correct this in my seam allowance. So going forward, whatever I lay over top of this, I'll just make sure that, see how that could catch in that seam allowance. And then you'll never know that I had a little bit of a bowing there, a little bit kind of dented in. So once you have 16 of these for 2 blocks made, you can set them aside, or 8 for 1 block. And we can go on to the next one. So number 2 on this side is another elongated flying geese, but this time instead of 2 rectangles, it's a square and a rectangle. So we're going to take an eye piece. So we've got eye here. So 2. And an H, 2 H pieces. You need to make 4 of these for 1 block or 8 for 2 blocks. All right, so this time we're going to lay it on this side first, the H piece. And then we're going to draw our line going from this corner to this corner. Make sure you can see that. This corner to this corner, this corner to this corner. I'm just using a regular pencil here. You don't really need anything too fancy. All right, and again, for this one, we're sewing on top of the line. And I've still got my little triangles on the end there. I can just chain piece this right to it. Again, if I were to butt it up this way, this tail kind of gets in the way. So if you rotate it, everything stays nice and neat. Okay, and once you've done your whole chain, I'm just snipping off the little triangles. Those will be saved for later. But again, we're generating more of those triangle waists. That's going to be the theme of this whole thing, I can tell. Maybe we'll have a little contest to see what people make with their triangle scraps. All right, so now I've got 4 more triangles I can sew, but you'll have lots more because you need more of these units. You need to make 4 for 1 block, 8 for 2 blocks. Remember, we're making 2 of these blocks. I'm just making 1 right now, and I've got part of it done. So that's why I'm only showing you how to make kind of 1 at a time. Otherwise, this video would probably last all day. These blocks are big. They take a little while. Okay, so those little triangles will be there. Okay, so now I've got this unit this way. We want to press towards the white. So I'll give it a little finger press first and towards the white. Now, if you end up, I've got this one's way too off. I could tell when I was sewing it, I was like, oh, I kind of missed the mark at the beginning. Even though this is trimmed, I'm going to press this out again and I'm going to re-sew it. If this happens to you, even if it's trimmed, take the time and just re-sew it. Get your seam ripper. Even though it's trimmed, no big deal. You can still re-sew it. Because sometimes with flying geese, that happens. You don't hit maybe your line isn't totally diagonal, or you go off the line a little bit. So I'm going to take this one out. And just correct it best you can. You don't have to cut new fabric. You'll be able to use this one. And I'm just going to line this up a little better. Let's make sure right sides together. So lay this down like this down like this. And I want this to just come down a little bit more. It was just a little too, I had it placed just a little too high up. And you can see I was off my when I'm looking at the stitches, I was a little off my drawn line. So that's going to happen sometimes, especially when you're yakking and talking and trying to sew. So I'm going to do it again. If you're finding this is happening over and over, slow down a little bit, turn your speed down. Just to try to improve your accuracy. There, that's much, much closer. It's still not perfect, but it's much, much closer. We're not going for perfect, you guys. Close is good. And again, it should be a strip. You don't have too much out. So that's better. Corrected. All right. Actually, it should go this way. Because now we need our little C square. We had lots of C squares from before. And right sides down, we're going to go here. Right sides down, we're going to go here. And draw that line. And then again, sewing right on that line. So you're going to do that for all of your pieces. So I'm just slowed down a little bit on my machine so I can stay straight on that line. In starting on these really pointy points, if your machine has the HP foot, use it. If your machine has a straight stitch needle plate, this is a great time to use it so that those tiny little points don't get stuck down inside your stitch plate. That's the worst. You get like a whole like kind of knot and tangle. But the straight stitch plate will help with that. If you don't have a straight stitch plate and you want one because yours is always getting caught down in there, let us know and we can send you off one. Okay, this is up a little bit, but it's not too bad. Let's see this one. This one's more right on the money. So see here on this one, I'm just a little, my square started just like a 1/16 of an inch up a little bit. So I'm going to sew that one again. That way it's also nice and right on the money. And don't feel bad about, you know, these elongated flying geese. You really have to be lined really like right on the money to get it to form a strip. So you don't do it the first time, no shame in doing it again. It's best that it turn out. So let's try that again. And this will happen. Oh, that's much better. This will happen to you probably too on your first couple of these flying geese where they, you know, are sort of flopping off the edge. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and trim these, layer them up and trim them also. You'll really see how your pieces bow when you layer things up. But that's all right. We can make up for a certain amount of that in the seam allowance. If it's really way off, then do it again. Again, a few more triangles for the pile. I'll quickly stitch them. and we are pressing towards the white. Okay, so now you should have 4 of these for 1 block, 8 for 2 blocks. And now we're going to do the exact same thing. But in the opposite direction. So if you see in the book here, number 2 has this triangle on the left side, and number 3 has the triangle on the right side, and we need to make 4 more of these. So you're going to take an eye piece, and you're going to take that white piece again. The H. So we've got 2 more H's here. And just like we did on the other side, this time I'm putting this on this end. And we're drawing our line from here to here. And sewing right on that line. Sometimes just the act of whipping it over to your machine is enough to get it out of whack. So if you have to put a pin there, you can, especially if you're doing a whole bunch at once. All right, so again, you're going to make 4 of these for 1 block, 8 for the 2 blocks. And we're going to trim, take off my little triangles for later. Let's just see if it's going to lay okay. Not the worst. Better. That one's pretty good. This one's just okay. I could live with it. All right, I'm going to trim these. Again, then we'll have our... Wait till you see, as you go block by block, how many of these little triangles you trim off. It's actually insane. So if you start thinking you've got a use for them right away, then it won't seem so wasteful. You just start sewing them together. Even the tiny ones. That'll look cute. Imagine you could get a quilt out of the scraps from the quilt. That'd be cool. All right, I'll leave those there. And again, we're pressing towards the white, just like before. And then again, we're taking a C piece, right sides together. So you're getting the hang of it now. You know, before maybe elongated flying geese, what? And now it's like, okay, I got it. That's why these sampler quilts are great, because you just do so many different techniques in all these different blocks. Sometimes when we do full quilts, it's so repetitive. But here we'll be doing just a little bit of everything all the time. And your skills are really going to sharpen. You know, things will become second nature, like flying geese will become second nature. Using the straight stitch plate as a little helper or a leader fabric, it'll all become part of what you do as a quilter to have success, because you will have done it so much. So I encourage you, you know, everybody's like excited to get started with block 1. You know, try to keep the same momentum going because we've got lots of blocks still to do. Hopefully you'll set aside this time every month. You'll need more than just the live session to work on it. But because it's, you know, one at a time, and in some cases we're making 2 of the blocks, but when you assembly line it, it moves quickly. You'll be surprised how much you're able to achieve. So with this one, I feel like I'm a little too far off the line. So I'm going to just sew that one down again. That's better. Okay. Trim. And then I'll sew the triangles and press towards the white. Again, you need 4 of these for 1 block, 8 for 2 blocks. Okay. Now we're going to assemble these elongated flying geese into these rows. So that's step number 4. Feel free to pause the video if you need a little break. It's no problem. So I'm going to grab my pieces that I have set aside. And let's just lay them out. Got 1, 2, and 3, 4. Whoops. That's why it's important to lay it out. Okay. Whoops. This needs to go this way. This one needs to go up here. This one needs to go up here like this. Whew. See, laying it out, because sometimes your mind just plays tricks on you. Okay. And then we're going to go right sides together. And now you can see I've got a little bit of making up in the seam allowance I can do here, but that's okay. 1/4 inch is going to come over there, and you'll never know about that little swerve in. Just making sure that the seam allowance is over far enough that we can make that up. Okay, and then this one's also right sides together. Just make sure you're sewing on the correct side. This time it's here. All right, let's open it up. And then right sides together. We'll press these after. Okay, and now you'll see the arrows here have a bunch of different directions. So the outside ones are going this way, and this one's also going this way, which means we can press the middle seam open. So we're going out on either side and then open. And then this is going outwards. This one's going out. Okay. That is one. We're almost to the end of our end unit. We need to add these blue cornerstones here. So we are taking two J pieces for each one of these units. Oh, okay, watch this. This is what I mean by having a fold. So look at how this is bowing in. But that's because when I pressed it, this is not fully to the stitch line. So just check, because sometimes that can make your blocks misshapen when really you've got the fabric there. It's just that you've pressed it and you've put a fold in. So try to catch that. There we go. Okay, so now I'm taking two J pieces for each one of these units, the side units, and we're going to go right sides together on the corner that has the most white. And now what I would suggest here is folding this in half just to make sure you're not going to lose your point here. If where you've got this lined up here, let's say it's like that, if you fold it in half and you can see that you're losing the tip of your point, then you can push this down a little, because we don't want to lose the point. We also don't want there to be a big white section like this there either. We want it to be right. We want to see the tip, and that's it. So when you line it up, just take a second to make sure that where you have your line drawn is really going to allow you to see the point. I might have to use my longer ruler here. I need a ruler that's not quite this long. Okay, and then we're going to sew right on that line. Again, I'm just going to check. Looks like it'll be okay. And right on that line. And so you can do this for all 4 units at once or do them one at a time. And then, yay! See the point and not much else. Okay, so now I can trim 1/4 inch away from the end. And now look at the big wasteful triangles we're getting. So our scrap piece is going to have some big units too. I'm just going to sew that. And we want to press towards the blue. And we're pressing now because these seams may cross. Okay, your other J piece in the corner. And again, fold it in half and see how it's looking. This one looks like it might cover a wee bit. I think this is the one where I ironed it wrong. So I'm just going to push it down a little bit. Draw that line. We're almost to assembling the whole block, you guys. So thanks for staying with me. If you're making along with me, keep it up. Remember, stopping and starting is good. No problem. All right, before you trim it, oh, there's my little triangle for later. Check it. Good. Just are seeing the tips. That's good. Let's trim this one. Next month I'll have, I got to get a little more manageable ruler for the smaller stuff. All right, I'm going to sew that. And pressing towards the blue. Whew, lots of work. Okay, so now we have 4 of these middle units too. And we've got 4 of the corner units. And the only thing left to make is the center unit here. And the center unit, based on these instructions, I think the instructions could be better, let's just say. So follow along in the video here. So let's set these aside for now. And I'm going to take you right back to the cutting of the L and the K. So let's bring out our K units, just a sec. Because here's what happens with this unit. I'm going to show you. It doesn't really show you in the instructions, but when you read it, it says that you need to make triangles out of these, but it doesn't really show that in the cutting instructions. It just kind of gives you this little tiny, like, arrow or like line through this one particular from the medium aqua print to know to do that. And same with the one 5.5 by 5.5. It says has that little cross in it. And that means they need to be cut into those triangles, which if you didn't really know that would be very confusing. So let's just do it together. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your a K square. Let's see, do I have another one here somewhere? So K, let's just see what it needs to be cut. 4.5 by 4.5. We're getting a little overrun with fabric here. I should be tidying more as I go, but live. All right, so 1, 2, 3, 4. Can we get there? Yeah. And 1, 2, 3, 4.5. And then the L square, which is 5.5 by, sorry, is it L 5.5 by? Yeah, 5.5 by 5.5 needs to be cut on the diagonal. So I'm going to use my big ruler again. It needs to be cut on the diagonal twice. So the instructions aren't very clear about this, but follow along here and you'll get it. So there, and then again, here. So it's sort of like how you'd start a quarter square triangle. And now you end up with 4 equal triangles. And then the way you assemble it is like this. Right sides down, and then right sides down again. And you just need to make this one time. So I'll just sew the 1/4 inch here. And if you need to, you could fold this in half, this side, and put just a finger mark. You don't have to iron it, but just so you know where the center is, so you can line that point up. It's hard to see on the dark fabric, but if you kind of just finger press it in. All right, and we're going to sew that 1/4 inch right along there. Okay. And we're going to press out towards the white. My little for later. And we're pressing out towards the white. And you can kind of see what's going to end up happening here when we sew all of these together is a new square is going to form here, allowing for sort of this diamond shape in the middle. So I'll press this towards the white. See what I mean when it all comes together here? And And then you're going to sew on the other side. So if you look on page 76, it talks about making these square in the square units right here. And so you start by going opposite ways. All right, find the middle. And then press out. And then bring your other one over, right sides. Don't worry about trimming yet. And sew a 1/4 inch. And then you can kind of see how that other square is starting to form. It's a bit awkward on the brain. It kind of does tricks, plays tricks on you at first, but then once you see it, you see it. Make sure this is lined up. And press towards the white. And then you're basically going to do the same thing again, but now with your teal fabric. Which number is it? I should look on my sheet. Number 18. Your number 18 fabric that you also cut in the triangles. Before you do that, though, you need to trim this to 6 1/8 inch square. Making sure it says to leave at least a 1/4 inch here, like beyond the border, so that we can attach our other square to it. Oh, I'm losing my ruler. Where is it? There it is. I think this is 6 1/2. Oh, 5. Wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, this is only 6. So I need 6 1/8. So I'll have to use my big one. So here I just have enough to kind of take off the dog ears. Trimming off basically just the dog ears. And I'm using the ruler line here just to see where 6 1/8 is. This one's pushed out a little farther than I'd like, but I think I can make up for it. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 1/8. So I can trim this. Okay. So now with your M pieces, you're going to cut your M pieces in half. So you can layer them up if you haven't already cut these from the beginning. And then with this unit, you're going to do exactly the same thing that you just did, this sort of awkward triangle sewing. So if you want to find the middle again, and then line it up. And we're going to sew it right across. And you'll press out towards the blue, and essentially you'll get here. So let's just add the last one to this one. Line it up. Okay, I'm going to press towards the blue. And now we want this to measure out 8.5 by 8.5. So whatever we have to trim off here to get it there, we want to make sure that we've got at least 1/4 inch on this side so we don't lose our points anywhere. So just be careful of that. So this is an 8.5 inch ruler. So let me find the center point here if I can. I can go use that diagonal line from end to end. Then I should be able to get 8.5 right on the money. And 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.5. So this line right about there. I need to move this one up a little. And then I just need to do this side. And that's going to be just right square. Little thread there. Okay, so that's trimmed to 8.5. So now we've got all of our pieces and we're ready to assemble the full block. And assembling the full block, the most satisfying part of the entire thing. So I'm going to just move all my little scrap pieces. We may need to use them a bit later on. So let's start by laying out the block. I'm going to clear some space here. No small feet, but lots of leftover fabric. Okay. We'll start with the center. And we'll our corners. Middle unit. Middle. Middle. Woohoo! All right, that looks good. Okay, so now we're really just going to take it row by row. So I'll start with this bottom row, and let's go right sides together. And we can go right sides together each row and chain piece this. Make it a little faster, so each one sewing that 1/4 inch. So each one of these, I should actually stop before I do it. I should actually just check that each one of these is measuring 8.5 by 8.5. Since we centered up that center block, we should be making sure these all measure 8.5 by 8.5 also. There may be a little bit of trimming to do. So if I take my ruler, that's 8.5, and use that center line. And there we go. And you can trim off any extra. Not too much, but it does square it up nicely. And it will make for a nicer finished block if you take the time to trim these. Okay, one. I wish I had just a square, not this long one. But use what you've got. This one's pretty well. Pretty well right on the money. These ones I've trimmed. Sometimes they don't need much. Okay, lay this out again. So top corner, go, bottom corner, center, okay, and then right sides together with them trimmed. This is when you really notice when the trimming is done, when you go right sides together like this, everything lines up so nicely. All right, let's chain piece this now. Next one. And notice how before I bring them over to the machine, I'm just checking to make sure it's really that side that is getting sewn. It's no fun having to pick out at this stage because there's so many seams that you're sewing through. So just check. All right, and let's lay this out again. Always lay it out in between, open it up, lay it out. Aha. Look. Darn it. This needs to be facing in. See, I did that too quickly. It really does matter. You have to lay it out. Maybe you guys saw that when we were screeching at me. That's okay. At least the whole thing isn't sewn together. This is a quick stitch rip. Although I find it harder when you've got a lot of seams to do a real long zip to rip it out because it kind of catches. Plus, I think this seam ripper has seen better days. I've lost the cap for it. It's just a tiny little bit, so it's even smaller in my hand. That kind of stinks. All right, turn this the right way. There we go, Jen. There we are. Okay. Or I could have left it as a, can you spot what's wrong with this project? Winner gets a free seam ripper. Okay. Just one more time. All right, better. Okay, now we're right sides together this way. In fact, okay, here's my trick. I always want to go right sides together on the side that's facing my machine. So that means bringing these two blocks over this way. That way I know I'm sewing on this side because it's closest to my machine. That's just something that helps me, rather than have to turn things around so that you're sewing on the right side of your machine. All right, so here we go. Okay, next one. Okay, next one. And this is where you'll see, I mean, the trimming helps, but if you have anything to make up in the seam allowance, just be conscious of that. Don't flip over your seams as you're going. And now for the pressing here, let's lay this out again. Top, middle. We need to press before we go on. Bottom. And I think I'm going to do this on the big ironing board. Let me just move this, all my junk out of the way. You guys sew and accumulate as you go. I tend to always be putting things to the side and putting things to the side, and then that's the side I need to work on. Okay, so what it would like us to do, according to the arrows, is for the top row, we're going to go in towards the middle, then out, then in. So the center row goes out, the other two rows go in. So let's bring it over. This one's going in towards the center. So, Jason, we could probably use this one. I don't think we have it clear. So we're going in towards the center, and just take a second to make sure everything else isn't just flipped. So we'll bring over our next one. This one's the one that's going to go in towards the center. Or sorry, is it? No, out, 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 out. Middle, out, away from the center. So one side goes, yeah, one side goes this way, one side goes the other way. So one side goes this way, which means this one side goes that way and one side goes this way. Okay, sorry. The top one, the seams go in. The middle one, the seams go out. So we're right the first time. And then the bottom row in towards the center. All right, now let's lay it out again, and we're going to nest these seams. So it doesn't matter which is the top or the bottom, it's the same. All right, right sides together, and we'll nest those seams. Find it with your finger and your thumb and put a pin right in the middle. So don't worry so much about the ends. You want these points coming together in the middle. And then if you need to put a pin to kind of keep it straight along the way, because it's kind of a long way we're sewing this time. And you can see like my one end over here, it's not totally flush. That's okay. It's best that this point be. The finished block measures 24.5 by 24.5, so we can trim it up to size. Oh, I'm about to bend that seam over. Don't do that. So If you have your homemade stiletto, this is where this comes in handy, where you can push that right back down. Make sure this is lined up. But we don't want those seams to flip. But it often just will catch on the presser foot, so you can hold those down with your stiletto if you have one. Don't run over your pin. Get rid of that pin. Hold that seam down. You can see how far I'm off my end here, so we'll have some trimming that needs to get done there. I mean, it's bound to happen with a big, big block like this, with all these different quadrants coming together. Okay. Almost there, almost there. We'll get that pressed in just a minute. Now we're going to go right sides together here. And we're going to nest these seams. So pin and pin. And I'm just going to bring my stiletto back over here because there's all these ones in a row that could be flipping out. Just hold those down. Slow down if it's getting away from you. Take the pin out. Okay, back to the ironing board. And, oh, I missed a little bit here. I'm just gonna, go ahead, we can set up the ironing board. I'm just gonna sew this. Just needed to catch, I can see a little hole. Just check, make sure you don't have any holes. I have a little bit where I needed to catch the seam allowance. No shame. No shame if you have a little hole. Okay, so it wants me to press the seams out. So away from the center. Just careful with all the rest of your seams here. I have a little wee spot here I need to catch. Okay, so clear off lots of space So you can lay out your blocks, and we're going to trim them if we can. This is only a 24-inch mat by 36, so we'll have to do it one way at a time. But you can go ahead and trim your block 24.5 by 24.5. So I'm just going to count this over. So 34. So 10. So we've got a little bit to maneuver here. And flip it. Just trimming off the edges. So we've got 24 by 24 and a, sorry, 24.5 by 24.5 inch square. 1, 2, 3, 4.5. Okay, now we've got 2 blocks, 24 by 24.5 by 24.5. Gorgeous. I love how big they are. That's like such a showstopper. What a great one to start with. To be so big, such a big dramatic block. It's really one of the highlights of the quilt, and it's so nice that we got to start here. So I'm going to give this another little press out, make sure it's like all nice and flat. Maybe give it a little spray with some flatter, and then it'll be nice and crisp. And I'm going to set it aside and get ready to do block 2. Thanks for joining me for block 1.